Throughout human history, every human being has had the same innate drive to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. Even those of us who seem to go out of our way to punish ourselves, to destroy possibilities and successes, are doing so as a learned protocol for meeting our human needs in an environment that is not always our most competent teacher. Every human being in the history of humanity exists on a continuum of quality and intensity, 1 to 10, and success in the hierarchy of fulfilling our human needs to survive, to feel secure in that survival, to experience love and belonging, to develop self-esteem, an earned sense of respecting and liking ourselves, to develop our unique talents and gifts, to bring those gifts into the world successfully and abundantly. And in the warmth of that abundance, to become part of something bigger than ourselves, of transcendence. Each of us is on that continuum to varying degrees. Now, an intelligent interaction, an intelligent container or activity is one that accelerates the development of sustainable well-being and reduced unnecessary suffering by fulfilling our human needs, by accelerating the rate, the quality, the intensity with which we meet one or all of our human needs. And the idea in 10x living, the 10x paradigm, is that it's easier to 10x something than it is to 2x it. That when you try to 2x something, you just try and work harder and run faster in the existing system, which you can never run 10 times faster than you're already running. You can never cram 10 times more things into your routine. So when you set out to do something 10 times better, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a company, whether it's a service that you offer, when you set out to do that, you open your mind to the questions about design. Now, as someone, setting up the paradigms, the ideas, the focus of my life to develop and explore these thoughts with you, I don't make any claims whatsoever about, being particularly, good or better than any of you in all areas. I have my strengths that I do extraordinarily well, and I have all kinds of shortcomings, and I want that known going in, that this is not a relationship of inequals. There is a cost to producing videos. There's a cost to video equipment, to hosting, to taking time off work and developing all of these. And to have a sustainable relationship with any organization or entity, it's important that those benefiting contribute to sustaining it. In my main career as a landscape designer and installer, I've slowly created more and more time for myself, quite deliberately, and reached a point where I can generate $1,000 to $3,000 a day, working 2 or 3 hours a day, which is more than enough to cover my lifestyle. And I'm now funneling $50,000 to $100,000 a year into one of two nonprofits that I've formed. And the core question, what really makes sense to me, is how can we as individuals create the most amount of sustainable human well-being for ourselves and others for the least amount of energy? And for that sustainability to work, it includes restoring and regenerating the ecology that gave birth to us to a better condition than when we arrived. A small part of that, I've planted 1,000 trees and started a carbon neutral program where you and anyone else can plant 1,000 trees with the effortlessness of donating $1,000 to any of the tree planting nonprofits, sending the receipt, and getting the carbon neutral badge. So I'm into these ideas. I'm honored to explore these with you. And the purpose of keeping the group small and high commitment is, first of all, intimacy. The more one learns and reads and studies, the more one understands that one size doesn't fit all. And as part of that, I want to be open to the fact that this engagement, this online group, may not fit you. And your job as an intelligent human being is to decide, one, if it does, and then just as importantly, is there any group, any activity that would generate more sustainable well-being per unit of energy than involving here? Because if there is, your job is to do that. You may not have to decide, however. The average American, I believe, spends up to 6 hours a day checking various screens, most of which do not yield any net sustainable human well-being, and some of which has a statistical negative correlation, meaning the more you spend time on Facebook, for example, the less happy you are statistically. And so, if you've got 2 or 3 different venues of high growth and acceleration, why not do them all? Why not learn about the strengths and weaknesses? Because as I've attended different groups or different therapists or read different books, I know that everyone has strengths and everyone has blind spots and liabilities. And sometimes it's the people who connect the dots and are willing to teach the teachers, to lead the leaders, that have the most to value or most value to offer to a group. Now, the language that a group engages with is really important for momentum. You can think of the phenomena of a train traveling by at 300 to 600 miles per hour, a really efficient train. A lot of energy is spent going up to ramp. And if a group has to slow down to cover the bases each time a passenger gets on the train, it becomes too costly for the group for anyone new to participate. And that's why I'm offering you a self-ramping process to come up to speed as fast as you feel like coming up to speed, at which point you can participate in the group. Now, the value of a high-cost group is that it eliminates more than 99% of the people. One of the reasons, whether it's Twitter or YouTube, deteriorates as a venue is that it's free to play. You don't need to know anything. You don't need to spend any money. You just need to know how to type. And so there's a very low barrier to entry. And typically, the response of content creators is simply not to engage. If you look at 90% of whether it's Joe Rogan or Tony Robbins or any of these people, they just don't engage with their audience, via YouTube or, in many cases, Twitter, because it's too expensive to spend energy when it's not going to have any impact. Now, when you engage in a high-cost group, and by far the biggest cost of participating in this is the on-ramp of knowledge and competency. The money this is not intended as a money-generating venue, or I would be growing my contracting business instead of, keeping that as small as I possibly can, so as to invest in other areas. But what you get to know is that every single person you'll be interacting with, whether it's me spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to this point and, various growth venues and, more to, develop the technology and all of that, or whether it's any of a very small number of people, every one of them put in, 30 or more hours in reading and growing in self-awareness. Now, that's a very intelligent thing to do, to invest in oneself. It's also very intelligent to learn the vocabulary and etiquette of a given group. Every group has its own culture, and the root word of culture is cult. It has certain memes. And those memes create flow. You understand what to do in this group or this group. But some cults are a lot more intelligent than others and accelerate your movement along sustainable well-being, and others bog you down with all kinds of absurd minutia. And so my goal in creating this on-ramp is, first of all, I'm applying the 80-20 principle, having digested more than 500 books and taken bits and pieces and experimented, an enormous amount to see what works. I'm putting together the things that have had the most positive impact in my life, in the areas that matter most. Romantic relationships are definitely one of those areas. Creating more freedom with time, definitely one of those areas. Certainly creating enough money so that you can start doing what you want with your time is important, as a launch pad, so that you can start discovering your gifts and bringing those into the world. So have a look at the launch pad below. Anyone who can sign up to a limit. I'm going to notice my thought is initially 10 people, is about as much as I want. Because, when you join a 500-person group, most of the people there have really important things to say that are not being said for time constraints. It's not efficient. And you learn the most when you can speak as well as be heard, when people can see you clearly. So the focus here is on quality and intimacy. Intimacy leads to quality, and I like the little kind of hack called Into Me, You See. If you see something clearly, you can figure out how to engage. So if you're looking to stretch, to build muscles in self-awareness and engagement, this group works in multiple levels simultaneously. You have to develop self-assertiveness, initiative, and self-discipline just to prepare. Well, that's skill. is vital to your success. And so if you can't get into the on-ramp, you know then where a huge hurdle is. And what can you then do to get to the point where you could have that self-discipline? If you are wasting a tremendous amount of your time for one reason or another, usually not having enough discernment to say no to the things that don't yield high levels of well-being, well then that's where your work is. If you don't have time to live a 10 times better life, there's something wrong with the operating system. And so what is that? Why live a 1x life? And so there's a tremendous amount of filtering and meta dynamics going on to want to be seen, to risk the fear of being judged, which is essential. You will be judged, and it won't always be favorably. So if your entire possibility field implodes because you cannot risk the judgment, then that's where your work is. So a tremendous amount of meta work is involved just in joining the 1%. But far more intelligently than filtering by billionaires or multimillionaires is to filter by these dynamics, by the decision to pick quality over quantity. For example, you have 100 intimate friends. You don't know that much about many of them, and many of them don't know that much about you. So the value is in the smallness. And I'm creating this partly in response to, I always enjoy, I've probably got 500 pages of comments and thoughts that I develop when I watch content creators. Because in the dynamic of growth, you have sympathy, which is to find something you agree with in a person or their philosophy. You have antipathy, which is to find flaws in it. And there are flaws in every single person and philosophy. And then you have synthesis, which is how do you take the best of the good, reject and refine the worst of what's bad, and make something new and better. And that's your job. It's not just to learn what I've refined out of, all of my different mentors and 46 years living in multiple different countries and running a successful business since the age of 17. That's what I've synthesized, rejecting different things from this cult, from that cult, and brought this. But your job is to go beyond that. Evolution dictates that you accept and ingest what's given to you deeply and fully so that you can get a head start. Then discover and reject the flaws. And then either leave the group dynamic if it can't grow with you, or synthesize, and then in the most competent domain, you become part of the teacher. Can you present my flaws in such a way that is useful for me and useful to the group, but most importantly, useful for you? Can you do a better job in some area? And then can you partner? Because there's a profound network effect. There's a synergistic effect when you have, 10 or 12 highly competent people working on that. And then where does that go from there? That's the next question. So the ramp is below, and you can know that of all of the hundreds of different things I've considered including in this ramp, I think this lays the best foundation for competent, respectful flow and dialogue from a variety of different unique perspectives to support one another, to challenge one another, to invite one another, and to collaborate together in accelerating the development, the fulfillment of our human needs, and then on into preferences.